Alright, the first thing you want to do is download the project files from our website. The link should be down below this video. And then you go to File, Open Project, and Open Other, and you're going to browse to the location on your computer where you put those. I put mine on the desktop, Rocket 5 2D game, and then click Open. Alright, so here's the basic interface. One of the things that they added was this in 4.3 was this 2D button up here, so we can go ahead and click that. And what it's going to do is it's going to lock out the Z-axis on the scene view. This is scene view up here and the game view down here. And so if you turn that off, you get back to the 3D view and you can see the 3D camera like that. But since it's a 2D game, we'll just keep it locked to that camera. So a few things to note. I went ahead and I made the game set to standalone 800 by 600, and I did that over in File, Build Settings, and it's set to PC Max Standalone. If you click Player Settings down here, you'll get some settings you can set for your game, like you can set the icon and stuff like that. And I set just the default screen width and height to 800 by 600 just because it's nice, decent size for like a web player or something like that. And it'll just create some nice constraints for us to work with our sprites. So there's a number of ways we can start. The first is let's just go ahead and throw a sprite in here and see how it looks. So if you look up in the project area, you can you'll find the stuff that's in the project files that you downloaded and opened just a minute ago. And let's just look up in the level folder, and then we can just drag a brick texture. Oops, a brick sprite. Oops, that did work, but it's just way over here. I'll delete one of those. So just put that at 0, 0, 0 so we can kind of see it up here. So you can see there it is in the scene. That's one of the cool things about the new sprite system in Unity is it's pretty easy to add sprites to the game. I didn't really have to configure anything. I just dragged and dropped it into the scene. You'll notice that down here in the game view that the sprite is really really kind of small, and we can fix that by going to the main camera. Anytime we create a new scene in Unity, the main camera is automatically going to have a perspective. It's going to be set to the projection of perspective, so we'll just go ahead and set that at orthographic, and I believe we want to set this to 3. This is just a setting that I figured out earlier to make sure that the sprites are going to be pixel perfect on my screen. That size setting is basically going to be your Z depth for the scene. Since we don't have access to the Z on the camera, we use that instead. Oops. Let's see. So yeah, and I'll just drag that back in here. Oops. I have a layout already pre-configured. So we'll click on that guy again and just kind of look at it. There's really nothing special about this thing yet, except that it's just a sprite, so it's just going to draw. We can add some stuff to it right away if we want, since we have it in here. So we can add some components to it. This thing isn't going to have any physical properties to it, like if we had a player in here right now, it would just fall right through the brick. So let's just go ahead and add a collider to it, and we'll do that under Physics 2D. You could add 3D physics if you want, but we're going to demonstrate the new 2D stuff that was recently added. So we'll click on Physics 2D and then Box Collider 2D, and it automatically creates a 32 by 32 collider object which is the same size as our little pixel art brick, which is 32 by 32 pixels, and you can tell it's got a collider on it because it's got that green box. If I were to turn off this over here in the inspector, it would turn off and on. And then I'm also going to change the layer up here in the upper right hand corner of the inspector from default to ground. And this is a layer that I added earlier. If you want to look at what the layer editor looks like, you can click on that again and click Add Layer. And this is the tags and layers editor. So by default, you wouldn't have anything listed under user layer, but I went ahead and added them ahead of time into the project file. So I added ground, this team 1 goal, team 2 goal, etc. And again, so you'll click on your brick, make sure the layer is set to ground, and that it's got a box collider on it. And real quick, we can go ahead and actually turn this into a prefab so that you can use this thing over and over again in other scenes and not have to keep making changes every time you make a sprite. And you can, if you do make changes to the prefab, then it'll propagate to all the other prefabs in your other scenes. So to do that, I've already made a prefab folder, and you can just take it from the hierarchy and drag and drop it into the prefab folder, and then it'll automatically make it a prefab. And you tell it's a prefab because down in the hierarchy it's changed to a blue color. And you don't have to just drag it into a folder called prefabs. You can drag it anywhere into the project, any folder that you like, and it will go ahead and make it a prefab automatically. I'll go ahead and save my scene just out of habit. Select assets, and we'll make a new folder called scenes, and then we'll call it game. And then you can see that a scenes folder ended up here with the name game, and our up here on the title bar it says game.unity. So now we don't have to worry if anything goes wrong. We'll have everything. All right, so let's throw in a player. Let's do something a little more interesting here. So again, up here in the sprites folder in the project area, look under player, and then we've got some sprites for a team 1 guy and a team 2 guy. So it's basically the same thing, they're just different colors. And we've got a run animation, a basic single frame fall, which we'll use for jump, and then we'll just use one of the walk cycles for an idle. So what we want to do is grab team 1A at frame 1, 2, and 3, the first 3 files there, and we're just going to drag and drop those into our scene. You could also drag them into the hierarchy if you want, but drag them into the scene. Oops, why didn't that work? Nope, I'm having trouble with the dragging stuff into the scene. Anyway, let's. So I put it into the hierarchy that time, and we'll do. It's automatically going to come up with this create new animation window. So Unity recognizes since I dragged in 3 sprites at the same time that it knows that I want to make that into an animation. So I'll go ahead and give this a name, and again, just for the sake of being organized, I'll make a new folder called anims, and we'll call this call it team 1 walk, because that's the walk cycle. And a few things happen when I did that. So automatically we've got a sprite, we've got our dude over here, and let's just center him out. And again, sorry, I've got this in perspective, but we can set it back to 2D mode again by pressing that button up here. We'll just be locked into a 2D camera, and I can move him up a little bit so he's not on our brick. And so it created an animation automatically, which I just named. And if I'm in the animation editor and I press play, you can automatically see that that's working already. And I think if I just press play in the game too, he'll go ahead and start walking, which is pretty nice. So it created several different components there. So it created the player in the hierarchy, which I'm going to go ahead and rename now to player 1, capital P, player 1 without a space in it. And that's actually going to be important later. One of our scripts is going to look for that player name. And it added a animator component, which you can see over here, which is connected to the Mecanum system. And there's that that animation node here in Mecanum. So we're going to want to do a few things. We want to get a couple more animations before we dive into that too far. So let's go back to the animator, and you can see there's the name of the animation we just created. It was Team 1 Walk. And let's create a new clip, and we'll call it, and back in the animus folder, we'll call this one Team 1 Jump, or Fall. Let's call it Team 1 Fall. And there's nothing in here, but if I take this sprite over here in the project folder called Team 1A Fall and drag it into the animator, you can see that little sprite showed up. If you don't see the sprite, it could be because you've got this little arrow here collapsed. So just expand that and you'll see it, which is kind of a really nice feature. And we can actually switch between the walk animations and the fall animation that we just created. Now you're not going to see it play or anything in here because it's only a single frame, but you can see it nicely in the walk. All right, we'll hit the record off, and then we're going to make one more. So we've got a walk, a fall, and we're going to make one more, and this one we're going to call Team 1 Idle. And we're just going to grab one of our walk frames and use that as the idle. And I like Team 1A F2, the second frame. And so now that's in there, and that's it. I mean, it basically created these 3 sets of animations for us, just like that. And if we go back and look in Mechanum, now we've got 3 nodes in here, 3 different animation nodes. And so we want to connect these so our scripts will actually pay attention to these things. So this is like an animation state machine that they added in Unity 4.0 called Mechanum, and it's just kind of a nice system for connecting animations together. And we'll kind of look how it works. So the first thing we want to do is create an int in here, and we're going to call this thing P1 anim state. You can call these things anything you want when you're making your own games. This is what I chose to call it for this one, and this name is important because there's a script that does actually look for that, and I'll show you how that looks later. So, and then I usually kind of move these things around so they're in a sort of order that makes sense for me. And I sort of arbitrarily decide what number each one of these things is going to get, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So to connect these things together, we right-click on one and then click Make Transition, and then it'll snap to the others, and then so we'll just go to Walk, and now it's made a connection there. If you click on that arrow, you can see over the right-hand side in the inspector exactly what conditions we want to occur to make it go from the idle to the walk. And in our case, we want to select the P1 anim state from the list, which is the one that we created over here under parameters. And I want to say when the anim state equals 1, then it'll go to the walk animation, and then we can connect it right back to the idle, and we'll just say that idle is 0. So we'll say that P1 anim state equals 0, that it'll go back to idle from the walk, right? So if we're in idle and the anim state is 1, then it'll go to walk. If we're in walk and the anim state changes to 1, then it'll go back to idle. So real quick, I'm going to connect all of these up so we can just go ahead and just make transitions back and forth between all of these so that we can make sure that no matter what state we're in, that we can always go back to another state. So again, we'll go from idle, we'll go to fall, and this one is going to be 2. We've already used 1 for walk, and we've used 0 for idle, so we'll use 2 for fall. You've got to set all of these because they default to something else. And then, so this is going to be P1 anim state 1, and this is going to be 2. Oops. Okay, so these should be all set up now. Now, if we can kind of see this work in action. So if we press play, it's going to default to idle, so you can see our character is just standing there. You can see this little bar is moving, but if I change this to 1, now I'm essentially changing this condition right here in the editor, and if I change it to 2, it's going to go to fall. If I change it back to 1, it's going to go to run. If I change it to 0, it's going to go back to idle. So you can kind of play around with this and see before you start coding exactly whether or not this is going to work. So you saw there it went from the fall to the idle just by changing that from 2 to 0, and back to 1 again. We go to our walk. Okay, make sure that's set to 0. All right, so let's get the rest of the player going so he actually turns into something that moves around in the scene. So again, we have this animator component. You want to remove this apply root motion checkbox, so it defaults to apply root motion. We'll uncheck that. We're going to add a few more components to this guy. So we're going to want a physics to. Well, let's go ahead and add the scripts first, and let's talk about those real quick. So I've included some scripts in here, which is like a character controller and and the controls that'll actually make the script the character move in the game. So we'll go ahead and drag player 1 onto there. You can just drag and drop it in the inspector. You can drag and drop it directly onto the character in the scene or into the hierarchy, whatever is easier for you. We also need the character anim script. So this has got the code in it that deals with making sure that these state change at the appropriate time. And now we want to add some built-in Unity components. So we'll click Add Component, and again, Physics 2D. And we're going to use a circle collider. Let's do the rigid body 2D first. We'll just kind of go in order here. So rigid body 2D is basically going to add the physics to our character, things like mass and drag and gravity and things like that. So we've got that on there. And then we'll add another component. So we'll click Add Component, Physics 2D, and a circle collider. Right? So this is going to provide the collision for our player. And you can see now if we look up in the scene view, you've got this round, this circle surrounding our sprite. So that's pretty much all the stuff we need. I think there's a couple things. If I press play now, it's going to behave a little funny. But before we do that, we'll make a little bit bigger ground, and you can do that just by duplicating these objects, so that we actually have something to fall on. And if I hit play, now our guy is on the ground, and he's kind of rolling around. You can see he's animating, but he's not behaving quite right. And that is because, we'll click back on player 1 or select him in the scene. If we look under Rigid Body 2D, you want to check this fixed angle checkbox because so that'll lock the rotation, so we won't rotate anymore. I think we also want to check this is kinematic checkbox. Let's see what happens when you do that. Oops, nope, he won't actually fall. Alright, so we'll leave it like that. These kinematic checkbox would be as if you were driving the character through script rather than wanting the Rigid Body 2D to control the gravity of your object. You would check that, but we're going to let this thing control the gravity. So we've got the basics of our character now. The only other thing we're going to do is we're going to set the layer on him to the player layer, and again I added this before, so you can just click on that, and I'll explain how that works a little bit later, the reason why we need to do that. So let's real quick, let's look at how we make a level. So you can duplicate objects by pressing Command D on the Mac, and I think it's Control D on the on Windows. And then you'll notice if I just click and drag around on it, it's just going to move around in the scene, and it's kind of hard to line things up. One of the cool things in here is we've got, if we go under Edit and then look at Snap Settings, you can change this move X, Y, and Z and the scale and rotation, but we're only concerned about the move X and move Y. You can set these to 0.32, and because our objects are 32 pixels, I know that 0.32 is going to be exactly, it's going to make it the brick move exactly the same size that it is. So if we take a thing and then hold down the Option key, or sorry, the Command key, and then drag it around, you can see that it's moving exactly 32 pixels each time. And you notice it's a little off down here, and that's because I moved these off the grid when I was just kind of showing you how movement works. So try to stay on the grid. Don't move it first. Just hit Command D and then hold Command and drag it around. And you can do big grabs like that. You can use you can sort of marquee select several different things, and so select a bunch, hold down Command, and then drag them over, right? So you can kind of do the ground up real quick as we go across, and then it's not really centered, so I'm just gonna kind of move it down here. All right. And we've got a ground that covers the width of our screen. Now if we press play, we shouldn't have to worry about the player falling out of the world. And there's screen wrap built into the code, so it's just detecting if he's on the edge of the screen, go ahead and teleport him to the other side, so it gets a feeling that the world is bigger than it is. You may also notice that the cubes here are kind of off the bottom of the screen. We can fix that by, and that's because it's again it's set to 800 by 600, which isn't divisible by 32. But if we just well, there's a bunch of ways we can move stuff around. If we want to make sure that we're only moving on the y-axis, which is up down in Unity, you can hover in the inspector under transform position. You can hover over the y and then hold down the left mouse button and kind of drag up and down, and it'll move just that thing, right? So I'm just moving left and right with my mouse, and it's changing that position. And you can kind of see I'm also lining it up. It might be hard to see, but there's a grid line in there, so I'm lining it up with the grid line, and it's pretty close to there. So at minus 1.84, negative 1.84, it pretty much looks like it's the bottom of the brick is lined up with the bottom of the scene, which is cool, right? Because now you can go ahead and you can duplicate objects and kind of move them around, and you've already kind of got the basics for creating a level that's on a grid that you can rely on. So if I hit this and then run around, you've also got a double jump. Oops. Okay, we notice that the player is kind of holding on the edges of things, and also I set those a little high, so it's kind of hard to get up here. I'm going to show you guys how to make him so he slips off of edges. So if you hit jump once, he'll go up once, and if you hit it again, he'll double jump. Well, let's fix that. Let's fix that sliding problem first. So we'll make a new material up here. There's already a folder called Materials. It's got one thing in it so far that we'll talk about later. But you can right-click on that folder and go to Create, and then you want Physics 2D Material, and we'll give this a name, and we'll call it Slippery, because we're going to make a material that makes the player slip on objects. And we'll set the friction to 0. I'll play around with the bounce later when we get to the ball. Go back to your player, and then you'll notice that there is a, remember we added the Circle Collider 2D earlier? Well, it's got a slot for a Physics Material 2D in it right there. So we can drag that slippery material right into that slot, and so now it's assigned, right? If we click on that, it'll go back and it'll highlight the one that's in there. Now if we press play and we try to jump against something, see how it's slipped? See how it's slipped on the edge? One thing to note about Unity, if you're new to Unity, is that things aren't persistent in play mode. So actually, let me show you what I mean by that. If you are in play mode the way I am right now, so the game is actually running, and if I do anything in here, like I'm gonna take this cube, and you can edit in here, right? It'll let you do anything you want to do. I'm just gonna make a wall so we can show how the slippery material we just made works. And now if I run up against that, you can see it's going to slide down that. Right? So he's just falling off of it, which is cool. It's a little easier to get around. You're not getting hung up on stuff. If I press play now, you'll see that those bricks that I sorry, if I press play in order to get out of play mode, you notice that those bricks I created in play mode are gone. So this happens a lot in Unity. Happens to me all the time. I've been using it for a long time, but it's just one of those things. Just try to make sure that you're out of play mode. You can change the color. If you go to Unity Preferences, this is how often it happens, that they actually added an option for you to change the play mode tint. So you can get like a really garish kind of color. I'm going to press play. The game goes into this red, so it's really kind of obvious, and you can change that to whatever you want, something a little less horrible. I just like to leave it white just because I don't like the way that looks, and take my chances. Okay, so we've got that. What else do we need? So we want to just leave all that stuff. So we could do a number of things. We can create goals, or we can create the ball. So let's actually go ahead and create the ball right now. You'll notice in our hierarchy things are getting kind of messy, right? So I have a lot of these level objects that I created are all kind of taking up all the space in here. Unity doesn't really have a concept of layers like you might find in something like Photoshop or groups or anything like that. But what you can do is just create an empty game object. Just go to game object, create empty. We'll name it something like _ level. And I always like to make sure these things are set at 0, 0, 0 on the transform. And then select all of our bricks. To do that, you click on the first one and then shift select on the last one, and you'll have them all. And then you can drag and drop them right onto the level game object that we made, and now we have a collapsible hierarchy, so we can get those out of the way. Now we have a nice clean setup here again. We can see our player in there. All right, let's make the ball. So the ball is going to have a similar kind of setup as the player, because it's also animated. It doesn't really have to be, but in this case, I thought it would be fun to have an animated ball. So we'll go into Sprites, Ball, select all of the ball assets, drag and drop them into your hierarchy. Again, it's going to bring up this Create New Animation window. Click on the Anims folder, and we'll just call it ball.anim. And we don't really have to worry about the animator, the mechanism thing here, because there's nothing special going on with this ball. Click on here, and we can look at it in the Animator and hit play, and you'll see that that sprite is flipping through its animations. Anybody who's worked with third-party plugins or anything in Unity already will recognize that this is a pretty handy setup. Pretty easy to make animated sprites, and what's really nice is it's integrated with right with the Unity animation system and the Mecanum system. So this is really great. Let's see. So we got our ball in here. Let's go ahead and it named it as the name of one of the sprites. So let's just go ahead and name that ball just for clarity. I want to uncheck this apply root motion again. And we've got some scripts we're going to add, or one script anyway. So we're going to take the ball script out of the scripts folder and drag it onto there. And we're going to add the particle effects component on there too. But let's first, before we do that, we'll add the physics 2D. So again, this is a physics object just like our player, so we want it to respond to gravity. So you click physics 2D and then rigid body 2D. You can leave the fixed angle unchecked on this one, I think, because since it's round, it won't have any problem rolling. And then one more time, physics 2D, and then we'll add the circle collider. So you notice that this time it automatically tries to make the collider the same size as the sprite. In this case, the sprite, the visible part of the sprite is actually bigger than the physical part. So we want to change that radius. And like I showed you before, you can hover over the word radius here and left and right drag to make that thing shrink. And I'm not moving very fast. I'm moving really slow because it'll go really quick on you. But set it down to about 0.14. Looks about right. And I think now if we press play, we're probably going to get some errors. The ball did fall and it's rolling around like a ball, but I didn't pick it up. And over in the console, we'll notice we have some errors. So we're going to add a visual effect to this ball. So this ball has a particle emitter that comes out of it. So let's go up to, and I already made it so ahead of time just to kind of save on some time. So go up under Prefabs in your project folder, Prefabs, Particle VFX, drag that into the scene. It came in at 0, 0, 0 for me. But the ball wasn't, so make sure you're at 0, 0 because we want these things to line up. So ball is at 0, the particle is 0. Let's go ahead and drag the particle VFX onto the ball object. So now you have another child-parent relationship, right? So the particle VFX is a child of the ball, right? So when the ball moves around in the scene, the particles will move with it. Next thing we'll do is click back on the ball. And remember there was that open field under particle effects in the ball script that we added. So we'll just go ahead and drag and drop particle VFX into that slot. Okay, that's going to get rid of our error. The color of the material on the particles is currently like this pink color. To fix that, we want to click on the particle VFX here in the hierarchy, and then go down under render, and you notice under material it says missing material. I made a material for that ahead of time, and that's up in the materials folder and project materials. Drag and drop that onto that empty slot. For anyone who's not really familiar with the way you assign things in the inspector in Unity, this is a really common operation, so it's good to get to understand how it works. Whenever you want to assign something that is in the inspector over here, you want to keep your selection over here in the hierarchy, and then click on the thing you want to assign and don't let go. If you let go, then you're going to select that other thing. So keep that selected and then drag and drop into the slot that you want to assign. In this case, with material. And you can see that now we've got this sort of yellowish, orange, yellowish particle. And I think if we press play now, we're going to get rid of our errors and play off there. Yeah, the ball is sort of floating around as it should, and it's got the correct thing. So it's not actually behaving the way it should just yet. Let me look ahead here. So we've got to add a few other scripts in order for the ball to actually be pick-upable. And we've got to apply one more thing. We're going to set the tag on the ball to ball. So this is another thing I add. So this is exactly like the layer editor. It's just the tag editor. So you get to it in the same place. There's the layers down there. And the tags are up above. when you open Unity for the very first time before you, or a new project for the first time, you won't see anything in here. You won't see anything listed down here, and this is just stuff where we add tags. And this is just some of my scripts are looking for these elements in order to differentiate them from other physical objects in the world. And let's try one more time. Okay, so now that I've assigned the ball as I've assigned the tag on the ball to ball, right there. Now I'm getting all this spew in the console because it's looking for some other stuff that I want that it's necessary for the scoring and stuff to work. So let's do a few things. So there's these more scripts that we need to add to our scene, and the easiest place to sort of put them is just on an empty game object because they don't really belong on physical objects in the world. So I go game object, create empty. That gives me an empty game object. I'm just going to call it scripts, and I set it at 0 just out of habit. And we'll go under the scripts folder, and what we need is, we'll just do these in order. So we need the audio manager, drag and drop that over here, and it'll add the audio manager script, and this has got slots where we're going to hook up all of our WAV files later on. And then we've got our score manager, and this is where we're going to hook up our UI stuff for the scoring and things like that. And then one more script XA, and this is just a random name for it's a script that's full of a bunch of global variables that help with script communication. Alright, so I think we'll probably get a different set of errors now. Oh, okay. So yeah, just doing that has gone ahead and made it so that our player can actually pick up the ball and stuff. So obviously you've probably noticed by now this isn't really like a scripting tutorial. That would be a whole nother video tutorial series that I would have to do on that. So I'm kind of taking some shortcuts with the scripting side of it. But feel free to like jump in. If you want to look at the scripts, you can basically just click on any, double-click on any script in the scripts folder, and that's going to open up MonoDevelop, which is the scripting environment that comes built in with Unity. And we'll wait a second here for that to open up. And then you can kind of browse around and see what's going on in the scripts here. I'm not going to spend too much time going over these right now. Maybe I'll look at some more later as questions come up. Okay, so we're still getting one error, and I think that's just because the second player isn't in the scene yet. You can actually double-click on stuff in the inspector, and it'll usually go to that location in the script. In this case, it's not. Actually, this has been working for me lately where I double click on stuff and it goes. But usually if you double click on an error, it'll go ahead and open it up in the in MonoDevelop and take you to the problem. And in this case, I think it's probably this line right here. It's looking for an object named player2, which doesn't exist yet because we haven't made him. Alright, so next thing. Alright, so let's make a goal so that when I take the ball into there, the player will actually score points. So we'll go back into the sprites folder, and there's a goals folder, and we'll grab goal orange and drag and drop it into the scene, and you can see again it's made a sprite with the sprite renderer on it. You can another trick for snapping that I didn't show you guys before is that if you hold down the V key and then move the mouse around, you see that that blue dot is changing to the corner, and now if I drag, it will automatically snap to any other point in the level. Super handy. So we'll just stick that guy up there for now. We need to add another component onto this guy, or just one component, and it's going to be a box collider. And we're going to set that box collider to trigger. So the difference between a trigger and a not a trigger is, see how I can't walk through that thing? If I check this as a trigger now, oops, and then click back on my game, now I can pass through. So it takes like the physical properties off of the collider so that you can actually walk through it, but it still has physicality to it in the form that it can be, you can trigger stuff in script through an on trigger enter, on trigger stay, on trigger exit, so that when the player like enters these invisible, in this case it's visible, but sometimes they're invisible, when he enters these regions you can trigger things to happen, like you can trigger you know, sound effects, you can trigger enemies to spawn, you know, whatever you need your game to do. So in this case, we're making this thing, again, we're making it a trigger so that the player can walk through it, and when they're in it, it's going to score points. So we set it to, we add the box player 2D, set it to trigger. Up in the layer, I'm going to set this to team 1 goal. And again, I added that earlier. And I think now we're going to get a whole new set of errors when we drag that ball in there. Yeah, okay. So it's going to say that the score manager, some stuff on the score manager has not been assigned. So there's a score manager script that's looking for a bunch of like GUI text and stuff like that in order to like output the score to the screen. So let's make those. So we'll go up to game object, create other GUI text, and these objects are a little bit funny. They behave differently than normal objects. So look how I'm barely moving it in the scene view, but it's moving a lot in the game view. And there's different ways to handle this. You can use these pixel offsets to move things around. So like if I drag that, it'll move around. I'm going to set it back to 0 because, or you can use the regular transform. Honestly, I'm not sure which one is better. I don't really use these components. I usually use something like 2D Toolkit or something like that, which has some really nice font sprite stuff built in. Of course, that was before Unity added their new sprite tools in 4.3. I might switch over to a system like this in my next project. But for now, what we want to do is we're going to take that thing and we're just going to name it Team 1 Progress. Let's see, we'll change this to Team 1 Progress text. Right? And we'll set the font size to 30. We'll make it nice and big on the screen. And we can actually change the color of it as well. Over here, you've got this color area that's white. One of the cool features in Unity is you can click on this little eyedropper, and then you can click anything in your scene, and it'll take on that color. So we can grab the orange color from our player sprite. Now we've got a text color that matches. Excuse me. And we'll just change this default text to like 000%, because that'll match the scorekeeping that we're going to do. And again, it doesn't really matter where you put this thing right now. I'll let you guys play around with that stuff on your own, but I'm just going to kind of put it in the upper left-hand corner. And let's make a couple of more of these before we go on. We're gonna track multiple things besides just the progress of scoring, but we're gonna count the number of wins. So I'm just gonna duplicate that. We'll call it Team 1 Wins text, and we'll move it over a little bit, and it's gonna be a single digit, sometimes double digit, but we'll just set 0 in there for now to indicate that he has 0. And we'll go ahead and do we'll do Team 2 as well. So we'll duplicate Team 1 Progress, move it over, we'll change it to Team 2 Progress, and move it over here. And let's change the color of that, and it's going to be the same color as the cube, so we'll just click on select the color of one of our bricks, our ground bricks in the level. And then Team 1 Wins, we'll duplicate that and change it to Team 2 Wins. And we'll change the color of that as well with the eyedropper, grab the blue color, and then move it over. So I'm basically moving it up in the scene view, but I'm looking in the game view to kind of see where it ought to go. And I'm just kind of eyeballing it for now. Again, you can get super detailed on exactly how you want your UI to work, but this is just kind of a basic look at how to set up a simple UI. All right, we need a couple more things. So there's going to be text that appears when there's a winner. When a winner is announced at the end of a round. So we'll take this. We'll just grab any one you want, and let's set the anchor to like middle center. Whoops. Middle center, and then alignment center. And this is going to be like, we'll just put some default text in here to see what it looks like. So we'll say Team 1 Wins, and you could set, if you wanted this font could be bigger, we could set it to like 40. And we'll change the name of it in here just for organization. We'll call it round winner text. And then we're going to duplicate that one more time, move it down a little, and this is going to be round next text. So and this is going to be like a countdown. So this is going to be like a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 kind of thing. So we'll just set a number right here. Okay, so that's pretty much all of the text we're going to use for our HUD, but it's not doing anything yet, so we still have to set it up. So remember we created that scripts object before? If you click on that in the hierarchy, you've got the score manager area. Look for, we've got team progress 1, team 2 progress text, all of that. We're basically just going to drag and drop all these objects that we just created into those slots. So we'll just start with team 1 progress, goes into team 1 progress slot. Team 2 progress goes into team 2 progress. Team 1 wins. Team 1 wins. Team 2 wins. This is why it's helpful to name things correctly, so it's easy to tell what matches up. And then the round next and the round winner go in those slots. You can set some options here. You can set how long it takes before the next round will start. In this case, it's 5 seconds. You can set it to like 3, so it'll go a little quicker. You can select the score rate. There's some options here that we can talk about later. So we'll just leave it the way it is now. And I believe we're going to save the scene just in case. Press play. Yep, and there we go. So if we are, see now we're standing in the goal, and you can see that the percentage is going up, and it stays there. And I think if I get to 100%, it should announce that Team 1 wins. Okay, orange wins, and everybody kind of floats away, which could be fixed later. And now it's gonna give some errors because there's still some stuff missing. But so a couple of things. Let's turn off the Team 1 wins and this number 3 because we don't really want to see those until in between. So what we do is we select those and uncheck. I think we want to uncheck the GUI text on those, and that'll just basically hide them. All right, so we uncheck those. And just again to organize, I'm going to go ahead and throw these. I'm going to select all of these text objects I made and just throw them under the scripts object, just so that they're kind of grouped together, right? So they match up. We've also got some audio, so you notice there's a bunch of empty, there's a bunch of slots on the audio manager with nothing assigned. So real quick, we can just hook these up, and we'll just go like beep 1 to beep 1, beep 2 to beep 2, win, pick up, and pass, and progress. And we need an audio source as well. So there isn't an audio source in the scene by default. And we'll just add an audio source to the main camera, since we always know the camera will be near the player or looking at the player. And so go to audio and then audio source, and that's going to add this bunch of information on here, which you really don't need to worry about at the moment, but there's a lot of really great stuff in here. So go back to scripts, and now we can drag and drop the main camera onto that audio source slot. If we had tried to drag the main camera onto that slot before, it wouldn't have let us because it wanted an audio source, and there was an audio source on the camera. But now it's like, oh, there's an audio source component on there. I'm going to let this happen. Now, if we press play, we should hear sound. Yep. So we hear sound. Hear sound when you throw the ball, when you pick up the ball, and when we score. Get up there. All right. And there's a score rate over here. So the score was going up kind of slow. I added this because when debugging, it's nice to have this thing go a little faster. So you can set this to like 0.05. So this is the amount of time that it waits in between each time it adds a percentage to the score. So now you can see it's going twice as fast. And when it gets to 100, it's going to show the orange wins. Okay, and it restarts the next round with some errors again because there isn't there's no player 2 in here yet. So let's go ahead and add player 2. We're basically going to do the same thing we did for player 1. There's ways that you can speed up this so you wouldn't have to just duplicate the same exact process, but we're just going to go through it again anyway, just because that's going to be the simplest thing here. So again, we're going to do, so we're going to basically be creating the blue player here. So we're going to select the 3 frames of the walk cycle, just like we did before. Drag them into the hierarchy. Again, it's going to throw up, it recognized I was bringing in more than one sprite at a time. So it's going, oh hey, you want to animate this, which I do. So I'm going to call this Team 2 walk, because this is the Team 2 character. And just like before, it created the sprite, and it's got the animator component on it, and it's got the very first animation in Mecanum, and it's got that first animation set up in the animator in the animation window. So again, we're going to go click on where it says Team 2 walk, create new clip, go to the animus folder, Team 2 fall, and then we'll drag the fall animation in there, and then we're going to do that one more time, create new clip, Team 2 jump, idle. We want the Team 2 idle this time, because the fall is our jump animation, it's just a 1 frame. And it's going to be that, again, it can be any frame you want. I just like the second frame. And that's it. So you can look through those again. And then if we go to our animator, again, we've got those 3 nodes that correspond to our animations. Again, just organize them so they're a little nicer. And we're going to add a parameter just like we did with the other one, except this one is going to be called P2 anim state. P2. Remember the other one was P1 anim state. We don't want to confuse those two. And again, we're going to make connections between all of these. I'm just going to make all of the connections. So forward and back, in and out of each one of these. And then click on each one at a time. I wish there was a quicker way to do this. But so we're going to go, remember, walk is the same as the same. So it's going to be when P2 anim state equals 1, that's when it's go from idle to walk. And then when it goes from idle to fall, that's going to be P2 anim state 2. And then so all these are P2 anim state, 1 to walk, P2 anim state 2 to fall, and then P2 anim state 0 to idle. Okay, 0. Okay, so those are all set. Now we'll set up the character in the same way. So we're going to add, we want scripts now. So we want the player 2 script in this case, drag that, and we want to change my team to Team 2. And then we'll take character anims, drag it on there, click add component, physics 2D, rigid body 2D, add component, physics 2D, circle collider. Okay, now let's look at some of the options here. So some of the defaults are no good. So we'll take off apply root motion. We will click fixed angle, and I think that's it. We also want to set the layer to player. And then I think if all was right in the world. Yep. So now I'm controlling this guy with the arrow keys, left, right, up, and down. Sorry, I didn't mention before that the first character we made is controlled with A, D, W, S, right? And S is going to be your throw. So this guy is sticking to walls. Remember, see how he's kind of sticking there? So we're going to do the same thing. That's one thing we forgot to do. Let's also name him Player 1, capital P, or sorry, Player 2. So he's Player 2. So you have 2 players in the scene now. And we'll go up to materials and we'll look for that slippery. And you can actually drag and drop this directly onto the object, and it'll go ahead and it knows to assign it to the materials folder. So now, if we grab this guy, and see how he's not sticking to the walls anymore. All right, good stuff. Okay, so we need a goal for him. Let's clean this up a little bit. Let's get rid of that, and let's move this stuff around. You guys can make your level any way you like. I'm just gonna throw some stuff around just to kind of organize a bit. shove that stuff over there. All right, so let's make the Team 2 goal, and we do that. Go under Sprites goal, and there's a blue goal in there, and then drag and drop that into the scene. Remember, you can hold down the V and kind of snap it around. And we want to tag this thing as Team 2 goal. Or sorry, not tag it, but set it in the layer. So up in layer in the inspector, Team 2 goal. Add a component, physics 2D, box collider. Set the box collider to trigger. And now, when the blue player goes in there, he'll start scoring on his thing. And now we've already got a situation where we can do that. We can play capture the flag essentially, where one player takes the ball and takes it back to his base. Now check out one thing you might notice is that the goals are in front of the player. They're in front of the characters, so you can't it's a little difficult to see the player when they're in their own goal, right? So to fix that, what we can do is another nice feature that's part of the Sprite system is there's this thing called order and layer, and it's by default they're all set to 0. So basically that means that the layering of all the objects are on the same layer of 0. If I set this guy to 1, you'll see that he pops in front of that thing because this sprite is on 0 and now this player is on 1. So we want to set this guy to 1 as well, so he pops in front. And we can set the ball, we'll set the ball to 2, so it draws in front of everything. So now we'll go back. So see, now the ball is in front of the bricks in the level. He's acting a little funny. Let's see. I wonder if I thought. Oops. He's acting a little strange. Not sure why. He's not quite jumping. Anyway, hopefully we'll figure that out. So I thought it might be the kinematic thing. Okay, so what's next? Well, basically, we can kind of look behind the scenes at some of the stuff, but we're pretty much done with our game. I mean, at this point, you can go through. We only made the one brick, right? We only made this one brick prefab, but you can go and make additional bricks. So again, in level folder. So if you want to make some orange bricks, you can do that, and do the same thing where you drag a brick out there. Give it a physics 2D box collider, and then layer ground, and you can kind of snap it to another guy. Remember, you can go ahead and make this a prefab. The prefab thing doesn't really make sense at the moment, but if you go and start making separate levels that are in different scenes or something, you'll start to recognize how powerful they can be. So you know, we can do stuff like say, all right, we don't want any blue stuff. We'll say that this side of the screen is reserved just for the blue guy. So we'll get rid of those, and we'll just kind of make this half all orange. Or sorry, this side is reserved for the orange guy. And this is the basics of level design, right? Just like laying out objects in whatever kind of you know, configuration that you want, you know, to make these kind of fun spaces to run around. This one probably won't be very fun because I'm just kind of throwing it together real quick. You can connect those if you want, and it'll actually kind of wrap around. If you like the you know, the idea that both sides are sort of evenly matched or organized, so that there's no advantage to one team or the other. You know, you can do stuff like that. It's going to be a little tough to get up there, so what we can do is, this is a terrible design, but I don't know, we'll kind of see what happens. and then obviously you can do stuff like make it a little bit more vertical. Stuff up here, and these could even be up. Oops, these could even be up here if you want. Any kind of layouts that you want. So before, we can talk a little bit about some of the stuff that's going on in here. So before I was showing you how you put stuff in layers. So you notice how the players don't collide with each other? That's because they are in layers. Oops, hold on. Let's organize this again, because I remember I added those orange bricks in there, and so now they're outside of that. So we'll just drag them into level, so all your level stuff is in the same place. Right, so the player 1 and player 2 are both in this layer called player, and if we were to take them out, we'll just set it back to default. And now if we bump into each other, see how they're walking on each other? And they're pushing each other around. What we're doing is we're taking advantage of a physics setting that's built into Unity, where you have this collision matrix down here, where it shows all of the colliders in the world and how they interact with each other. So if we want player layer to not interact with another player layer, you can uncheck this checkbox, and that means that they'll pass through each other. The collisions will ignore each other. So now if we go back, so I uncheck that, and I go back and I'll set, I can click both players at the same time and then change that setting, and now it's on both players. Now if I go back, they'll just pass right through each other, right? Just something you see in a lot of games. And I think everything will work. Now if one guy wins, it should reset the next round. There you go. And that is pretty much it. Feel free to dig through the scripts and take a look at how things are working in there. There's a few bugs in the collision, like you saw the ball kind of freaking out in between rounds, and that's stuff that you can play around with to see if you can try to fix yourself. Come up with some hopefully better looking levels than what I just came up with here. There's a lot you can do with this. I mean, it's the basics of a lot of platformer kind of games and a simple kind of gameplay mode of capture the flag. All this stuff is tweakable. Feel free to comment on the website if you have questions. And yeah, thanks.